We're in Joshua chapter 2 tonight, if you'd like to turn there. Joshua chapter 2 is where we're going to be tonight. Last week, if you were here, we went through the beginning of Joshua, a little bit of the first chapter, but we went back and told a little bit of the backstory of Joshua, who is the new leader of the nation of Israel after Moses has passed off the scene. And God told Joshua that the time has finally come. Within a couple of days, he says, you are going to lead the Israelites across this Jordan River and into the promised land. So the time has come to do that. But Joshua decides before he leads everybody across the river, he wants to come up with a game plan of what they're going to do once they cross it. He didn't want to have the whole army standing soaking wet on the other side of the river. Wasn't even sure how they're going to cross it yet. But he didn't want to have everybody standing there vulnerable and then saying, well, now where do we go? Because once you cross the Jordan River, once you go into the land of Canaan, there's all these people there that are going to want to kill him. So before Joshua says, okay, well, let's all cross the river, he decides to send a couple of spies to go on ahead so that they can come up with a game plan. Now, he decides to send two. I don't know why. There's nothing spiritual or symbolic about the number two. But I do think back in time to when Moses had sent 12 spies, and 10 of them brought back a bad report, and there were two, Joshua being one of the two, that came back with a good report. Maybe he's thinking, I'll just skip those other 10 and I'll send two, and maybe they'll come back with a good report. I don't know, but he decides to send two because it's a covert operation. Maybe he didn't want to be found out. But he sends two guys in there to cross the Jordan River, to go into the promised land and decide what they were going to do. We're going to see tonight that they meet someone named Rahab. I'd imagine that most people in here are familiar with the story of Rahab. I remember learning about Rahab as a little kid, one of the benefits of being in church from the time that I was in second grade. But I remember not too much longer after that. In fact, I remember my third grade teacher telling us about Rahab. And it's one of those stories that stuck with me like many of these Old Testament stories have. So the story of Rahab is probably one that's familiar to us if we spend time in church. But as we go through this tonight, I want us to, as always I say this, try to listen with fresh ears. Try to read it with fresh eyes, because maybe the Lord will show us something that we missed as kids. In fact, when I was a kid, I didn't recall anyone telling me she was a prostitute when I was in third grade. So, there may be some things that we pick up on tonight that we didn't pick up on as kids. Maybe that we didn't teach our own kids. But so Joshua sent these two spies into the land because he wanted to divide and conquer in the spirit of Napoleon. These spies come in, they decide that Jericho is going to be the first city that they try to conquer. If we were to look at a map, where they would cross the Jordan River, Jericho would be immediately to their south, with the Dead Sea behind or south of Jericho. Jericho was positioned right in the middle of Canaan, or what we would consider the Promised Land. And so the idea was, if we can come in and take Jericho, instead of going to one side or the other, we'll cross the Jordan River, we'll be right smack dab in the middle, and we'll take Jericho. It'll be the first city, and then we're going to continue going west to Ai, and then continue to work their way south, and then they would eventually go back and get the other half. But if you can divide the enemy in half, it's a lot easier to conquer. And so that's what they decided to do. So Jericho, although centrally located, was going to be the first stop along the way. That's where Rahab happened to live. So if you're in Joshua chapter 2, the first thing I want you to see is the soldiers spied. Look at the first verse of chapter 2. It says, and Joshua, the son of Nun, sent two men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, go, view the land, especially Jericho. And they went and they came to the house of a prostitute, or a harlot, you might say, whose name was Rahab, and they lodged there. Now, the fact that they lodged there might sound kind of weird, given her profession. Why are they lodging there? But the better way of understanding it is why she was there, not why they were there. Her quarters, the place where she lived, is believed was built into the wall. You know about the walls of Jericho, and we'll talk about that in the coming weeks, and how they took the city. We're not going to get into that part tonight. But the walls of Jericho was a well-fortified city. The walls around it were so wide and so thick. Archaeologically speaking, we know a lot about the walls of Jericho. And built into the side of the walls were rooms, houses, or maybe even more like apartments, where you could even go up onto the roof of some of these houses. It's believed that Rahab lived kind of inside the wall of Jericho. So since the walls went around the city, as people would go and enter the city, strangers, spies, or travelers, or anyone else, you don't get into the city without coming up to the walls, going through the gates. And so they would have apartments, or what we might even think of as hotels. Hotels are always strategically located, right off the highway, with the big signs when you're driving down the road. And this is a good spot to put a hotel in Jericho when you're coming up in the city, right there inside the wall. So for a person of her profession, it was also a good spot to be located because as people are coming in, maybe travelers would stop in and they'd be not just thinking about whatever business took them into Jericho, but thinking about the extracurriculars while they're there out of town. Where can I find a lady? And Rahab would be positioned right there. You could get a room for the night. You could get some company. And that's kind of why she was there. So it's not like they were looking for her, and that's why they decided to lodge there. It's that she lodged where the visitors would be. They're coming to spy out the city, and so she happens to be there. Now, people in her profession kind of had an understanding with the government, with the leaders. In cities like this, they were expected to be what we might think of as like the CIA, or the KGB, if you want to go back to the Cold War era. They were trying to gather as much information as they could. Visitors are coming in, and right there in the walls of the city, where they would have their taverns or pubs, we might think of. And the more a person began to drink, the more information they may be willing to divulge. And so it was up to people like Rahab to get these people drunk, to find out as much as they could, and then report any pertinent information back to their government. So somebody like Rahab would know how to find out information from some of these people. But these two spies that come, whether they know who she is or what she is or not, we don't know. But their job, though, is to find out information about the city. She's trying to find out information about them. They're trying to find out information about the city, looking for a point of vulnerability, looking for a weak spot. They're thinking about this militarily. If we come in here, what's the best point of attack? How are we going to do it? How can we take such a city? And so they're trying to find out all this information. And that's why they were there to spy out the land. But number two, we see not only did the soldier spy, but number two, we see the soldiers hide. Drop down to verse 4. It says, the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. And she said, true, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. She hides these two spies. Now, who's she hiding them from? As whispers begin to move through Jericho, hey, there's some spies here. We heard there's some people there from the other side of the Jordan. We heard that some of those wanderers, some of those Hebrews have come here. We know that they're camped right outside the Jordan River, and we heard that some of their spies are here. People began to get nervous about this. There was a big reputation about those who followed Yahweh, about the Hebrews. And now there's a fear that they've infiltrated. Some are here. And if they're here, that surely means that they mean war against us. And so when they want to find out information, who do they turn to? They go to the walls of the city. They go to those rooms inside the walls. They go to Rahab and anybody else that would have been like her to find out information. Hey, a couple of guys come by here today. Have you found anybody from out of town? Any Hebrews been here lately? Tell us what you've heard, Rahab. Let's back up to verse 2. It says, it was told to the king of Jericho, behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land. And the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land. And that's what she said in verse 4. True, they were here, but I don't know where they were from. Well, that's not true. Look at verse 5. It says, when the gate was about to be closed at dark, she says, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. But here's the truth in verse 6. But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid out in order on the roof. The stalks of flax. When I heard this as a kid, in fact, Myra, I remember this as a flannel graph story when I was a kid. And I know Myra's doing flannel graphs with our kids. But they had this picture of like a couple of what looked like hay bales kind of stacked up, and the spies crouched down hiding behind those hay bales. And that's not really what it was like. The flax would have been in stalks that would be 5 or 6 feet high. but they would have so many of them together. Try to picture a teepee where they would be kind of spaced out and then angled in where they would all meet at the top, and they would kind of fan out several feet every direction. And so the flax would be gathered together, bound up, and put up on the roof to dry. Once it was dried out, it was used for making fabric for clothes. They also would use it to get oil to cook their food. And so it was a very hot commodity. It was very important in their economy. And so she goes up on the roof where her flax is up there drying. And with that teepee-like structure, she was able to put one of the spies inside a teepee of flax all around him. And there's no telling how many, dozens maybe, of these stalks of flax, where she could easily stow these men away. So while they're up on the roof, hiding in the flax, she's down there saying, yeah, they were here, but they left. And if you guys hurry up, go out the gate, they went away. If you hurry up, you can catch them. If you leave now and you run fast, you might be able to catch up with them. So she lied. She lied for people she hardly knew. She lied for the very people that were coming to check out her city because they wanted to conquer it. What would possess her to do that? Well, number 3, we see that Rahab lied. And I just mentioned that, but we continue on to try to figure out why she did it. Verse 7, the people she sent away. Go, hurry up and catch them. It says, the men pursued after them on the way to Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof. So here's what she said. I know that Yahweh, the Lord, has given you the land, her land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of this land melt away before you. For we have heard how Yahweh dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. And we know what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan. And she mentions them there, Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For Yahweh Elohim, for the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. What a testimony. What a sermon she just preached. Not bad for a prostitute, right? She says, I know that this land is yours. I know that your God, not the generic God, not one of the dozens of gods, but I know that Yahweh by name, I know your God is going to defeat us for you. We know all about drying up the Red Sea. Well, there's liberals today that want to try to explain away the whole Red Sea. Oh, they don't walk across on dry ground. Rahab knows all about it. We heard all about drying up the Red Sea and your God allowing you to walk across on dry ground. We know how you destroyed the kings that had come down for battle against you. We know the stories of who you are, and our hearts have melted away when we heard the stories. The spirit of our soldiers have left, and we are terrified because of you, and more specifically, because of your God. What a testimony that is. Man, it's incredible that these pagans knew all about God. And so when they come here, she thinks their God is about to deliver us into their hand. And so she hedges her bets. She says, oh yeah, I can turn them over to my king, and maybe he can arrest these 2. And then their God is going to deliver us into their hand. Or I can help them out, and I can join up with the winning side. And she chose very wisely. So she sends the pursuers on their way. She hides these spies, and she comes to them, and look what she says in verse 12. Now then, please swear to me by Yahweh that I have dealt kindly with you, and you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and my mother, my brothers and sisters, all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death. So the men said to her, our life for yours, even to death. They're making a deal. If you do not tell this business of ours, then when Yahweh gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, go into your hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way. And so in verse 17, they swear to her. They give her her word, their word of what they will do. So she continues to help them. I sent the bad guys your direction. So you hide out over there in the hills for 3 days. The coast will be clear and you can go on back. But just promise me, my lips are sealed if you promise that when you come in here, you will protect us. You will save my Father's house. That when you're killing all these pagans around us, that you will spare our lives. And they said, we'll do it. But there's one little problem. When the army comes in, and then the thousands of Israeli soldiers come in, they're not going to know who Rahab is. So what do? So they come up with this plan that she would put a scarlet cord, a long rope she would hang out of her window. And they went back and they told Joshua and they told the armies that when we go in, one window in the city walls is going to have a long red cord coming out of it. You don't touch anybody in that house. Everybody else is fair game. They are the enemy. But there's one person here that she risked her life to help us. And we're going to honor our word and we're going to take care of her. It's a great story. We'll get into the part where the walls of Jericho fall, and we're going to see they do just that. They keep their word, she keeps hers, and Rahab and her family will join up with the Israelites. They will become one of the first Gentile converts to what we may call Christianity. But I do want to pause for a minute, because a lot of you were in here on Wednesday night. I know some of you were in Awana. But on Wednesday nights, we've been going through the 10 Commandments. We cover the 9th commandment Wednesday night. You shall not bear false witness, or you shall not lie. Well, look on the screen. Rahab lied. So what do we do with this? We commend Rahab, don't we? We say, oh man, such courage, such bravery. She saved the lives of these spies. If she didn't lie, they may well have been apprehended. They may have been arrested. They may have been tortured for information. They may have been murdered. And they weren't. Why? Well, because Rahab lied to protect them. So how do we reconcile these concepts? How do we reconcile the command not to lie, and even that classic verse of Revelation, all liars will have their place in the lake of fire? So how do we reconcile that with Rahab flat out lying to protect these two? This is a tough one. This is one of those situational ethics nightmares. Is it right to do wrong if something good comes from it? Do the ends justify the means? Is it okay to lie to get out of a jam? That's a slippery slope if we say yes. Well, we can lie if it gets us out of trouble. Or we can lie if it helps somebody else. Well, then who defines when it's okay? If we start doing that, where do we draw the line? Oh no, this isn't enough of a situation to lie about. This is not that big of a deal. You have to be honest in this one, but you can lie in that one. That's tough. I don't want to start making those judgment calls. Now, we could say we're dealing with spies and national secrets and things. If you want to go down that road, fair enough, go for it. I mean, our Supreme Court has ruled that law enforcement is allowed to give false information as part of an investigation, or we could say they're allowed to lie. You can arrest two people, co-conspirators, put them in separate rooms, and go in one room and say, your partner over there is spilling his guts. If you want a deal, you better tell me everything before he gets the better deal. And not a word of that's true. They start saying, oh, he's telling me. No, I'm going to tell on him. It was all his idea. And you get them to start spilling their secrets that way. We say, well, that's not really lying. That's just, getting information. And, if we want to try to justify what she's doing, I'll entertain that theory. But here, I think, is the better way to look at it. How do we say that Rahab was righteous for what she did? And maybe you don't think she is, but I want to read to you a quick verse from Hebrews chapter 11, my favorite chapter in the Bible. Hebrews 11 verse 31 says, or let's go to verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. She makes the hall of faith. I mean, that's quite an honor. So the Bible says it was by faith she did what she did. So Rahab does something good, without a doubt, in this story. She acts on faith, and I believe a saving faith. But still, where was Rahab when Moses came down from Mount Sinai? She was doing what she did in Jericho. Moses comes down from the base of the mountain with these tablets, and the ninth item on the agenda says, don't lie. Rahab was nowhere to be accounted for when that happened. Rahab was not under this law. I'm not trying to excuse her being deceptive, but to hold Rahab accountable under a law that was given to the Jews at Mount Sinai, not to her as a Gentile in Jericho, who was not. Remember how the Ten Commandments begin? I am Yahweh Elohim. I am the Lord your God. I'm the one who led you out of Egypt. Didn't lead her out of Egypt. I am the one who protected you from the plagues, not her. You shall have no other gods before me. It wasn't given to her. And so she's not really under that law. But I do believe that honesty is the best policy. I do believe that even in these sticky situations, I think we should always stick to the truth. There might be consequences because of it. What about these spies? Isn't God a miracle-working God? If he wanted to blind those that went looking for him, couldn't he have done it? If God wanted to turn them invisible, couldn't he have done it? If God wanted to alert them from a talking donkey like he did with Balaam, couldn't he have done it? God does not need our lies or our deception to accomplish his will. We applaud Rahab for her courage, for believing in him, but at best she's a baby Christian. And so we can say the lying wasn't the best choice, but the faith we applaud. She didn't have it all figured out yet. She didn't have a Bible to read. She didn't have God to guide her. She didn't have Moses or Joshua to be her leader. She knew almost nothing about God except the rumors she had heard about Egypt. And so we don't excuse what she did, but we understand that at best she's a baby Christian. For us, we know better. We don't need to lie. We don't need to lie to help God out. We don't need to lie to help God's people. Now, we may have missionaries with false passports and maybe other jobs trying to get into countries. And, we can talk about that if you want to. But I always think in those situations, they're trying to get the gospel to people. And they're trying to do it so that souls can be saved. And maybe that's a judgment call. But for somebody like Rahab, I think we can forgive the deception and applaud the faith. We're going to see this from James in a couple of weeks. But what we see, what Hebrews 11 shows us, and what Paul and James talk about, is that believing is good, but the believing that compels us to action is when we are really counted as righteous in God's sight. God told Abraham to go, and he went. And when he did, it was accounted unto him as righteousness. I believe the Lord impressed upon Rahab to speak up for these spies. Maybe not to lie, but when she did that, she put her faith into action, and I believe that was the day that she was saved. I believe this is what saved Rahab's soul. She's going to join up, her and her family. They're going to join the Israelites, and they're going to become part of God's family, grafted in as children of Abraham. So we're going to see more about that in the coming weeks, but I thought, as we talked about lying last Wednesday night, that this would be a good thing to bring up. But it was Rahab's faith in God that saved her. She wasn't saved because she lied. She wasn't saved because she hid spies. She was saved because she believed in God. But that faith always calls us to action. You say that you have salvation by your faith. Well, I should see your salvation by your works. I should see your faith put into action by the things that you do. Rahab could have said, hey, I believe your God's real. Good luck out there, guys. And then turned him over to the authorities, and we wouldn't see any action on her part. And so it's a very thin line between the lying and the deception, but what we do see is her faith put into action, and that is what we commend Rahab for. And so in our own lives, do we just say we believe in God, or do we have action to back it up? As I mentioned, James being from Missouri this morning, and he says, show me, can we show our salvation by our works? Not just the words, not just what we say we believe. And we certainly see that in Rahab's life. So do you have that kind of faith in your own life? Faith to risk it all. Faith to stand up. Faith to do something big. Because Rahab certainly put her neck on the line when she did what she did. Do you have a faith that motivates you to stand up and do something big for God? So maybe tonight, or maybe in the coming days, you've been putting off doing something because of the risk. Maybe there's something that God has laid on your heart to do and you haven't done it because you thought, that's crazy. That'll never work. Maybe somebody you know you need to share the gospel with, you think, they'll never hear me. They'll never listen to me. Or, I've done it 100 times before and they've never once listened to me. But maybe God's laying it on your heart to do something big for him. To roll the dice, to bet big, to go all in and say, God, I'm going to move forward in faith, trusting you, and I'm going to do what you've laid on my heart to do. And if we do that, I believe that our faith pays off dividends. So that's the message for you tonight. To be like Rahab, not in every way like Rahab, but let your faith compel you to action like it did in the life of this young lady. So would you please stand tonight with your heads bowed and your eyes closed? Promised a short night tonight. But I just want us to look into our own life and just ask that one question. God, is there something you want me to do? Or maybe better yet, God, I know what you want me to do, and I've been the one dragging my feet. Lord, is there something that I need to do tonight? But Lord, I'm committing to you obedience tonight, faith tonight, that God, what you've wanted me to do, I'm going to do it. God, I'm going to trust in you to bring about the results. So Lord, I pray in these next few minutes that maybe tonight you've been trying to get our attention. Or maybe tonight someone will pray to you, Lord, is there something you want me to do? God, challenge me. God, give me a mission. God, send me out to do something big for you. And maybe tonight decisions will be made in this room. Lord, that's my prayer. Lord, we'll say, yes, yes, God. Yes, I'm going to do what you say. Yes, I'm going to do what you want me to do. And I pray that the kingdom of heaven would grow because of it. And Lord, that's my prayer tonight. So please move in these next few minutes and I ask this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. If the Lord has laid something on your